What if I told you that the most powerful tool for success isn't louder than a whisper? It's silence. The secret weapon wielded by the most influential leaders and visionaries throughout history. Why? Because true power is felt, not heard. When you learn to master silence, you command attention, control the room, and create an aura of authority that demands respect. But how do you turn silence into strength? How do you use it to win in every room you enter? In just a few moments, you'll discover how mastering silence can transform your influence, control, and command over any situation. The power of silent reflection. Have you ever noticed how the most successful people often seem the calmest? They step back from noise and chaos, while others rush around. They find time to be quiet and think. This isn't by accident. It's their secret weapon. Silence gives your mind space to work. When you're always talking, always busy, always surrounded by noise, your best ideas stay hidden. But in quiet moments, your mind connects dots you didn't see before. The solution to that problem that's been bothering you for weeks suddenly appears when you give yourself quiet time. Consider what happened to Senator Marcus Townsend in 1962. Facing a difficult election campaign, he was falling behind in polls. Instead of more speeches and appearances, he retreated to his cabin for a weekend alone. Everyone thought he had given up, but in that silence, he found clarity about what voters truly needed. When he returned, his message had completely changed. It wasn't flashier, it was more authentic. People felt the difference, and his campaign took a dramatic turn. He later said those 2 quiet days changed everything. Are you giving your mind the quiet it needs to work for you? What problems might solve themselves if you gave them space in silence? What brilliant ideas might be waiting for you in those quiet moments? Remember, noise keeps you reactive, but silence makes you creative. Most people run from silence because it feels uncomfortable at first, but this discomfort is just your mind adjusting to a new power. Will you have the courage to be quiet when everyone else is making noise? Learning from everyone. The wisest person in the room often isn't the one talking, it's the one watching and listening. Look around at truly successful people. They ask questions, they observe, they learn from everyone around them before making decisions. Why does silent observation work so well? Because information is everywhere if you're quiet enough to notice it. Every person carries lessons from their experiences. Every situation contains clues about what works and what doesn't. When you're busy talking or thinking about what to say next, you miss these priceless lessons that are happening right in front of you. You can master this skill with practice. Next time you're in a meeting, challenge yourself to speak half as much as usual. Focus instead on watching how others communicate. What makes some people persuasive? What causes others to be ignored? In social settings, notice who draws people in and who pushes them away. Don't just hear words, see expressions. Notice timing. Feel the energy in the room change. These observations become your private education. Eleanor Whitfield built a small shop into a retail empire by using this exact approach. Unlike her competitors who talked over customers about what they should want, she watched how people moved through stores. She noticed where they paused, what they touched, what made them put things back. She rarely spoke in strategy meetings, but when she did, her insights were so accurate, others wondered how she knew. "I just pay attention," she would say. Her silent observations led to store layouts that doubled sales, while her talkative competitors went bankrupt. When was the last time you learned something valuable just by watching? Could your next breakthrough come not from a book or course, but from simply paying closer attention to what's already around you? The next time you feel pressure to speak up, to prove your worth, remember, the real power might be in remaining silent and observing what others miss. Will you choose to be the loudest voice or the most insightful mind? Mastering emotional control. The mark of true power isn't how strongly you react, but how calmly you respond. Notice how the most respected leaders pause before speaking when tensions rise. That silence is not weakness, it's their greatest strength. Emotional reactions happen in an instant and often lead to regret. When someone criticizes your idea, questions your ability, or challenges your authority, your first reaction comes from emotion, not wisdom. This quick response might feel good for a moment, but can damage relationships and reputations for years. The silence between trigger and response is where your true power lies. Developing this skill starts with recognizing emotional triggers. Pay attention to physical signs. Faster heartbeat, tense muscles, rising heat. These are warnings. When you notice them, take a deliberate pause. Breathe deeply. Count to 5 if needed. Ask yourself, what result do I want from this situation? Let that answer, not your emotion, guide your response. Practice this pause in small situations so it becomes natural in important ones. When was the last time anger or frustration made you speak words you later wished you could take back? What might change if you own the space between events and your response to them? Remember, anyone can have an emotional reaction. It takes real strength to respond with purposeful silence. Next time tension rises, will you show your power through immediate words or through the silence that shows you cannot be provoked? The art of strategic patience. The biggest dreams often grow best in silence. Look at any truly remarkable achievement and you'll find that much of the work happened quietly, before the world ever knew about it. Too many great ideas die from early exposure. When you share goals too soon, several things happen. Critics attack while your idea is still fragile. Others may steal your vision before you can develop it. And strangely, talking about your plans actually reduces your motivation to complete them. Your brain gets a small reward from sharing, making you less likely to do the hard work. The most successful people understand this trap and work in silence until the results can speak for themselves. Apply strategic silence by dividing your goals into stages. In the foundation stage, share your plans only with those directly involved in helping you. Build proof that your idea works before announcing it widely. Document your progress privately. Create something small that demonstrates your concept. Only after you have something solid, not just an idea, but a working start, should you consider widening your circle. Let curiosity about what you're doing build naturally. Margaret Finley spent 2 years developing her revolutionary retail system while still working her regular job. When colleagues asked about her evenings, she simply said she was working on a home project. Even family received vague answers. While competitors loudly announced similar ideas and then faced public failure, she refined her system in silence. By the time she revealed her company, it wasn't just an idea. She had 3 paying clients and proven results. When asked why she kept quiet for so long, she said, "Seeds don't grow well when constantly dug up to check their progress." What dream are you carrying that might benefit from less talking and more quiet action? Have you experienced the strange phenomenon of feeling less motivated after sharing your plans? Consider this: the energy you spend talking about what you'll do is energy not spent doing it. The next time you feel the urge to announce your big plans, ask yourself, would this idea grow stronger in silence for a while longer? Would you work harder if the only voice cheering you on was your own? Intuition as your guide, that quiet feeling that nudges you toward or away from certain decisions. Successful people don't ignore it. They listen carefully. This inner voice speaks in whispers, not shouts, and can only be heard in moments of silence. In our noisy world of constant opinions and endless advice, we've lost touch with our own inner wisdom. Yet research shows our brains process far more information than we consciously realize. That gut feeling isn't just emotion, it's your mind connecting dots below your awareness. When you ignore this quiet guidance, you often end up saying, "I knew I should have." The most successful decisions come when external knowledge and inner wisdom work together. Reconnecting with your intuition requires creating spaces of silence. During important decisions, take a walk alone without distractions. Before meetings, sit quietly for 5 minutes rather than filling the time with more preparation. When considering options, ask yourself, what feels right? Before asking, what makes logical sense? Notice the difference between fear and intuitive caution. Takeo Yamada built his reputation on seemingly impossible market predictions. He sold all holdings just weeks before a major crash. Competitors studied the same data, but reached opposite conclusions. When financial reporters pressed him for his analysis method, he confused them by describing his daily 3-hour garden walks. In noise, I can only hear what others are saying. In silence, I can hear what the situation is saying, he explained. His company survived 3 market collapses that destroyed many others. His unusual practice of silent reflection before major decisions became legendary. When did you last experience that quiet knowing that proved correct, even when facts suggested otherwise? What decisions are you facing now that might benefit from less research and more quiet reflection? But this voice will not compete with noise. It waits patiently in silence. Will you create the quiet space it needs to be heard? Speaking less to be heard more. Have you noticed how people strain to hear someone who speaks softly? The person who talks constantly gets tuned out. But when the quiet person finally speaks, everyone leans in to listen. This isn't coincidence. It's the power of selective silence. Speaking less makes your words worth more. Most people feel uncomfortable with silence and rush to fill every gap with words. They repeat themselves, weaken their points with too many examples, and dilute important messages with unnecessary details. When you speak constantly, people hear only noise. But when you speak only when necessary, with purpose and precision, your words carry weight. Silence creates value for your thought. To build this silent confidence, start counting your words in conversations. Challenge yourself to express the same idea using fewer sentences. Before speaking, ask, does this need to be said? Does it need to be said by me? Does it need to be said right now? Practice being comfortable in silence during conversations. Don't jump to fill pauses. When asked a question, take a moment before answering. Quality thinking produces quality speaking. Thomas Blackwell transformed his company. During his first board meeting, directors were shocked when he sat silently through 2 hours of discussion about declining profits. When finally asked his opinion, he spoke just 3 sentences that completely reframed their problem. Later, when asked why he waited so long, he explained, I needed to understand the full picture before offering a solution. Speaking sooner would have just added to the confusion. Within months, his reputation for thoughtful silence made his rare statements company policy almost immediately. His peers who spoke constantly at every meeting found their opinions carried less weight. Are you weakening your influence by speaking too often? What would happen if you cut your words in half but doubled your thinking time? Remember that silence shows confidence in your ideas. They don't need constant defending or explaining. Most people speak to feel important or to release nervous energy. But what if your silence, not your speech, is what will ultimately make others value your contribution? The next time you feel pressured to speak up immediately, will you have the confidence to remain silent until you have something truly worth saying? Working without announcement. Look around at the people constantly talking about their goals, plans, and dreams. Now look at those quietly making progress every day. Which group achieves more? The answer reveals a powerful truth about success. Attention and achievement often move in opposite directions. When you seek attention for your efforts before completing them, you create 3 problems. First, you spend energy on appearances that should go toward progress. Second, you invite judgment and criticism prematurely. Third, and most dangerous, you give yourself a false sense of accomplishment just from the recognition of starting. The brain receives social rewards from talking about goals that can actually reduce your motivation to achieve them. True achievers understand this trap and focus on progress, not publicity. Practice silent achievement by keeping a private progress journal instead of posting updates. Set specific completion points before sharing your journey. Find one accountability partner rather than announcing goals to everyone. When asked what you're working on, learn the art of the interesting but vague answer that satisfies curiosity without revealing details. Channel the desire for recognition into more productive work, knowing that real results will eventually bring more meaningful attention than any announcement. Rebecca Chen stunned the sports world, setting a new record when nobody even knew she was competing at that level. While other runners documented every training session publicly, she worked with a single coach in complete privacy. Her competitors posted daily about their progress, received constant feedback, and became minor celebrities before the race. This created a satisfaction that made the painful parts of training seem less necessary. When asked about her silent approach, she said simply, "Applause feels better when you've earned it through results, not intentions." What goal are you currently talking about more than working toward? How might your progress change if you channel that energy into silent action? Consider this. Attention for what you're going to do feels good temporarily, but attention for what you've already accomplished builds lasting confidence. The world is full of people announcing journeys they never complete. Will you choose to be someone who talks about achievement or someone who silently creates it? Finding power in difficulty. When facing hardship, listen to how most people respond. Complaints, explanations, excuses. Now watch the truly successful. They often meet difficulty with striking silence, not because they have nothing to say, but because they're saving their energy for solutions. Talking about problems multiplies their power over you. Every time you explain why something is difficult, why you can't move forward, or why you're justified in feeling frustrated, you strengthen the problem's grip on your mind. You convince yourself of limitations. You focus on obstacles instead of opportunities. Silence during difficulty isn't denial, it's strategic focus. It contains your energy and directs it towards solutions rather than explanations. Build this silent strength by creating a complaint-free zone around yourself. When facing challenges, give yourself a short private time to acknowledge frustration, then close that door. Establish a personal rule. If you must speak about a problem, you must also propose a solution. Practice responding to difficulty with questions rather than statements. What can I learn here? Instead of, why is this happening to me? When others invite you to join their complaints, politely redirect the conversation to potential actions. Samuel Crawford demonstrated this principle dramatically when a catastrophic tunnel collapse trapped his team underground. While others panicked and blamed faulty equipment, Crawford remained noticeably silent. Instead of discussing what went wrong, he began methodically testing escape routes. When asked about the cause, he simply said, "That conversation helps no one right now." His focus created a sense of calm that spread through the group. After their successful escape, he explained, "Words of worry waste breath, and underground breath is precious." The same principle applies in any crisis. When you last faced a significant setback, how much energy did you spend explaining it rather than overcoming it? What current challenge might benefit from less discussion and more silent action? Remember that talking about problems often makes you feel temporarily better without actually improving your situation. Most people use words as an escape from difficulty. The successful use silence as a path through it. Next time trouble arrives, will you add your voice to the chorus of complaint, or will you find your strength in strategic silence? Learning without defensiveness. Think about your reaction when someone points out a mistake or suggests improvement. Most people immediately defend, explain, or counter-criticize, but watch those who grow the fastest. They often respond first with silence, listening fully before speaking. Defensive reactions block your most important growth opportunities. When your first response to feedback is justification, you miss the valuable information hidden within criticism. Your mind becomes busy defending your current position rather than considering how to improve it. Even when feedback is partly wrong, it almost always contains some useful truth. Silent receptivity doesn't mean you agree with everything, it means you're strong enough to consider anything. And Victoria Ellis transformed her career with this approach. After losing an important match, reporters watched as her coach delivered harsh criticism about her technique. Rather than the expected defensive response, Ellis remained completely silent, nodding occasionally while taking notes. Other players typically argued or explained away similar feedback. 3 months later, Ellis returned with subtle but significant changes to her playing style. When she won the championship, she credited that difficult conversation. "If I had been busy defending my old approach, I never would have fully understood the new one. Silence gave me room to grow." When was the last time you received criticism and your first reaction was to explain or defend? What improvements might you discover if you approached feedback with curious silence rather than immediate justification? Consider that defensiveness feels good in the moment, but prevents growth in the long run. Most people defend their current position fiercely. The successful defend their future potential instead. The next time someone offers you difficult feedback, will you choose the temporary comfort of defense or the lasting benefit of silent growth? Choosing your own path. Notice how quickly people offer their opinions about what you should do with your life, your career, your relationships. Everyone has advice, but the most successful people make their biggest decisions in a space of protective silence, away from these voices. Other people's opinions come from their maps, not yours. When you make important choices surrounded by noise, whether from friends, family, or society's expectations, you risk living someone else's version of success. External voices drown out your internal wisdom. Even well-meaning advice reflects others' values, fears, and experiences which may not match your unique situation. The most authentic decisions emerge from silence, where you can hear your own truth. Create this decision-making silence by temporarily stepping back from sources of influence before any major choice. Avoid asking for opinions until you've clarified your own thinking. Take a solo walk. Write your thoughts privately before sharing them. Ask yourself, if nobody would ever know about this decision, what would I choose? This question cuts through concern about appearances and reconnects you with authentic desires. Marcus Wilson stunned fans by declining a record-breaking contract with a championship team to play for less money with an underdog team instead. For 2 weeks after receiving both offers, he disappeared from public view, speaking to no one but his wife. Sports writers filled columns with speculation and advice. When he finally announced his decision, reporters demanded explanations. He responded, "I made this choice in silence, and that silence showed me what matters most to me. I can't expect you to understand a journey you weren't part of." His unconventional choice ultimately led to innovations in playing style that defined his legendary career. What important decision are you currently facing? How might your thinking change if you created a sanctuary of silence around this choice? Remember that external voices are loudest when decisions matter most, precisely when you need to hear yourself clearly. Most people make life's biggest choices surrounded by the most noise. The successful create quiet spaces where authentic wisdom can emerge. Will you let others' opinions determine your path, or will you find the silence to hear your own? Finding meaning beyond recognition. Look at people who constantly talk about making a difference, compared to those quietly creating change every day. One group seeks recognition for their intentions. The other seeks impact through their actions. The difference reveals much about true purpose. Announcing good intentions often substitutes for doing good work. When you publicly declare your desire to help others, create change, or make a difference, you receive immediate social rewards. This creates a dangerous illusion, the feeling of being purposeful without the effort of actually creating impact. True purpose doesn't need constant external validation. It finds satisfaction in the work itself and the results it creates, whether recognized or not. Develop silent purpose by focusing on results rather than recognition. Ask, would I do this work if no one ever knew it was me? Practice finding satisfaction in the impact itself, not the credit you receive. Look for opportunities to contribute anonymously. When you do something helpful, resist the urge to ensure others know about your role. Build relationships with those who value substance over appearance, who ask what you've accomplished rather than how you appear. What purposes in your life are driven more by how they look than the difference they make? How might your impact grow if you cared less about being seen as purposeful and more about creating actual change? Remember that the most meaningful work often happens in spaces where no one is watching or applauding. Many people perform goodness. The successful embody it, whether seen or unseen. Will you choose a purpose that feeds your image, or one that thrives in silence while changing the world around you, protecting your energy? Have you noticed how the most accomplished people seem selective about their commitments? While others say yes to every request, successful individuals often respond with purposeful silence. They understand that every yes to something unimportant is a silent no to something vital. Energy is your most precious resource, yet most people give it away carelessly. Each time you agree to a project that doesn't align with your goals, attend an event out of obligation, or engage with people who drain your spirit, you're spending irreplaceable energy. The noise of endless commitments drowns out the signal of what truly matters. Without clear boundaries, protected by deliberate silence, your most important work remains undone while your calendar fills with everyone else's priorities. Creating silent boundaries starts with pausing before every commitment. When asked to do something, replace your automatic yes with, "Let me check and get back to you." During this pause, ask yourself 3 questions. Does this align with my current priorities? Is this something only I can do? Will I still feel good about this commitment next week? Practice saying no directly but kindly, without lengthy explanations that invite debate. Remember that unclear boundaries require constant maintenance, while clear ones enforce themselves. Robert Jameson transformed his career. After several successful but exhausting projects left him creatively empty, he disappeared from the industry for 3 months. Upon return, he instituted what colleagues called his silent wall. He stopped answering calls directly, refused to attend industry functions, and declined seemingly prestigious opportunities without explanation. Critics called him difficult and ungrateful. When finally asked about this behavior, he explained, "I realized I was saying yes to everything except what mattered most, creating meaningful films. My silence isn't rejection, it's protection of the energy needed for my best work." Where in your life are you saying yes when silence would better serve your true priorities? How many of your current commitments would you accept if you were offered them today? Notice how explanations for your boundaries often turn into negotiations that weaken those very boundaries. Most people build their lives responding to the loudest demands. The successful respond only to the most important. Will you continue to let the noise of others' expectations drown out the quiet voice of your own purpose? Or will you use silence to create the boundaries your best work requires? The strength of your boundaries ultimately determines the quality of your work and life. Each time you silently decline what doesn't serve your purpose, you create space for what does. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship of your limited energy for your highest contribution. The world doesn't need more exhausted people saying yes to everything. It needs focused individuals who protect their capacity to do what matters most. Your ability to maintain silence in the face of demands may feel uncomfortable at first, but this discomfort is merely the growing pain of reclaiming your power. Let your silence speak the truth, that your time leading without dominating. Watch leaders in any setting. The ones who command genuine respect often speak less than you'd expect. While others fight for airtime and attention, these quiet forces create impact through their attentive presence rather than constant words. Dominating conversations actually diminishes your leadership influence. When you talk too much in meetings, interrupt others' ideas, or feel compelled to have the final word, you send a powerful message: your voice matters more than others. This creates superficial compliance, but kills genuine commitment. People may follow your directions, but withhold their best thinking and effort. True leadership influence grows not from speaking more, but from creating space where others can contribute their best thinking. Develop silent leadership by practicing the speak last principle in group settings. Enter conversations with questions rather than statements. When someone shares an idea, respond first with curiosity instead of evaluation. Count silently to 3 before speaking to prevent interrupting others. Make eye contact with quieter team members and directly invite their input. Record how much you speak in meetings compared to others and gradually reduce your talking time while increasing your listening quality. Patricia Winters revolutionized her struggling company using exactly this approach. Previously known for dominating every discussion with her expertise, she surprised her team by opening a critical strategy meeting with a question, then remaining silent for nearly the entire session. When team members looked to her for answers, she simply asked, "What do you think?" The uncomfortable silence eventually gave way to ideas from people who had never spoken up before. One suggestion from a typically quiet engineer led to their most profitable product line. Later, she explained, I realized my expertise was actually our biggest liability. It was preventing others from sharing theirs. My silence created space for solutions I could never have provided. How might your own expertise sometimes become a barrier to better solutions? What would happen if you deliberately spoke less in your next 3 meetings? Notice how difficult it feels to resist filling silence. This discomfort reveals how deeply we equate leadership with talking. Most people lead through assertion. The successful lead through attention. Will you continue seeking influence through dominance, or will you discover the greater power of your silent presence? Remember that silence in leadership isn't about being passive or uninvolved. It's an active, purposeful choice to create space where others can think, contribute, and grow. The most powerful statement you can make as a leader is showing that you value others' thinking enough to be quiet and truly hear it. This silent confidence demonstrates that you're secure enough in your own value to shine light on others rather than yourself. Paradoxically, the less you use your authority to dominate conversations, the more your actual influence grows. Your silence doesn't reduce your impact, it multiplies it through the collected wisdom and commitment of everyone around you. Consistency without announcement. Look at people who loudly announce their new habits, diets, or workout plans. Now look at those who transform their lives without fanfare. The pattern becomes clear. Those who talk most about their discipline often show the least of it in practice. Public commitment creates an illusion of progress that can sabotage actual achievement. When you announce your intentions to change, you receive immediate social recognition and support. This creates a premature sense of accomplishment that can reduce your motivation to do the actual work. Your brain experiences the reward before earning it. Additionally, early public commitment invites unrequested advice and criticism when you're still developing fragile new habits. The most effective discipline often happens in quiet, private spaces where intrinsic motivation can grow without external pressure. Build silent discipline by creating private tracking systems rather than public announcements. Start new habits with a personal 30-day trial period before mentioning them to anyone. Find satisfaction in the actual results of your discipline rather than recognition for it. When you do reach meaningful milestones, share the achievement rather than the intention. Surround yourself with people who value consistent action over enthusiastic declaration. Remember that discipline isn't about intensity, it's about consistency, which thrives in steady, unnoticed moments. What changes are you currently talking about more than implementing? How might your progress improve if you redirected the energy from discussing your plans to executing them? Notice how public accountability sometimes becomes public performance that drains the private determination real change requires. Most people seek recognition for their discipline. The successful seek results from it. Will you continue announcing intentions and receiving premature praise, or will you embrace the quiet power of change without announcement? The paradox of true discipline is that it doesn't look impressive in daily practice. It consists of small, consistent actions that appear insignificant in isolation, but transformative in combination. This quiet consistency rarely makes for exciting stories. The world celebrates dramatic transformations, but rarely witnesses the silent, unglamorous work that creates them. By keeping your discipline private, you protect it from becoming a performance that serves your image rather than your goals. Your results eventually speak for you. They will tell a far more compelling story than your intentions ever could. The most powerful discipline isn't what you talk about doing. It's what you quietly do every day when no one is watching. Changing without resistance. Notice how some people loudly resist every change, while others quietly adapt and thrive. When markets shift, technologies evolve, or circumstances change unexpectedly, most respond with vocal complaint. But the most successful meet change with a striking silence, not because they don't feel the disruption, but because they're already adapting to it. Talking about change consumes energy better used for adapting to it. When you verbalize resistance through complaints, explanations, or criticism of new circumstances, you reinforce your own attachment to the way things were. Each expression of frustration deepens your emotional investment in the past and delays your adjustment to the present reality. This talking creates an illusion of action while actually preventing the mental flexibility needed for true adaptation. Develop silent adaptability by practicing when significant change occurs. Give yourself few hours of private processing before discussing it with others. During this time, ask, given that this change has happened, what opportunities might it create? Keep a private journal of change responses rather than venting publicly. When others invite you to join their complaints about change, listen respectfully, but redirect conversation toward constructive responses. Remember that adaptation happens fastest in minds not busy defending the status quo. Margaret Coleman demonstrated this approach during the industry upheaval. When new regulations threatened traditional business models, competitors held press conferences criticizing the changes and lobbying against them. Coleman remained noticeably silent during this period. While others fought the inevitable, she quietly restructured her company to leverage the new reality. When reporters finally asked about her conspicuous silence regarding the controversial changes, she replied, "The energy others spent discussing whether the rain should fall, we spent building better umbrellas." Change doesn't ask permission or respond to criticism. Her company emerged from the transition period with record growth, while vocal competitors struggled to make delayed adjustments. What change are you currently resisting more than adapting to? How might your position improve if you redirected energy from complaint to creative response? Notice how discussing your frustration often feels productive, while actually keeping you stuck in it. Most people talk about change. The successful silently create opportunity from it. Will you spend your limited energy expressing resistance to what has already happened, or silently building something new based on what is? Remember that silent adaptability isn't passive acceptance of everything that happens. It's strategic focus on response rather than reaction. The most adaptable people feel the same initial resistance as everyone else. They simply process it privately rather than amplifying it publicly. This silence creates mental space where creative solutions can emerge without being drowned out by the noise of complaint. While others are still explaining why change shouldn't happen, the silently adaptable are already discovering how to thrive within it. Your ability to meet disruption with purposeful quiet may feel unsatisfying compared to the temporary relief of vocal resistance, but it gives you the ultimate advantage, being first to the future while others remain anchored to the past, continuing when others quit. Look at anyone who has achieved something truly difficult. Behind their visible success lies a common pattern. While others talked about challenges, made excuses, or announced giving up, these achievers continued forward with quiet determination, often saying nothing at all about their struggles. Talking about difficulties often becomes an acceptable substitute for overcoming them. When facing obstacles, most people seek comfort through explaining their challenges to others. This conversation creates temporary emotional relief and social understanding that can actually reduce your drive to push through barriers. Each time you discuss why something is hard or why you might need to give up, you normalize stopping and build a case for surrender. The most persistent individuals save this energy for the work itself. Build silent persistence by creating private challenges rather than public ones. When facing obstacles, ask yourself, what's the smallest next step I can take? Then focus entirely on that step. Develop a personal rule against announcing potential failure before it happens. Find one trusted advisor for necessary venting rather than spreading discouragement among many. When tempted to explain why you might quit, redirect that energy into trying once more. Remember that persistence isn't about never feeling like giving up. It's about continuing anyway, without needing to announce your struggles. William Harrison embodied this principle during the troubled construction of his revolutionary design in 1968. When unexpected structural problems emerged, contractors publicly declared the design impossible, and financial backers began withdrawing support. Reporters contacted Harrison daily for statements about the apparent failure. Through months of crisis, he offered only one response: "We're working on solutions." Behind the scenes, he faced repeated setbacks that would have justified abandoning the project. His team marveled not just at his refusal to quit, but at his complete silence about the difficulty. When the completed building later won international awards, a journalist asked how he maintained faith during the public crisis. Harrison replied, "Speaking about the weight I was carrying would have only made it heavier. Words of doubt consume energy needed for progress." What challenge are you currently explaining more than addressing? How might your persistence improve if you stop discussing how difficult your path is? Notice how talking about obstacles often makes them feel larger rather than smaller. Most people seek understanding for their struggles. The successful seek victory over them. Will you continue using your energy to explain why your path is hard? Or will you silently redirect that energy to moving forward despite the difficulty? The power of silent persistence comes from its focus on action over explanation. When you stop talking about how hard the journey is, you free yourself from the need to justify potential failure before it happens. This silence isn't about denying reality, it's about refusing to amplify challenges through constant verbalization. The most persistent individuals feel the same doubts, frustrations, and urges to quit as everyone else. The difference lies not in what they feel, but in what they do with these feelings. Rather than processing them externally through constant discussion, they channel them internally as fuel for continued effort. Your ability to keep moving forward without announcing your struggles may feel isolating at times, but it gives you an essential advantage. While others are still explaining why they might stop, you've already taken the next step forward, focusing on work, not credit. Notice the difference between those who constantly ensure others know about their contributions and those who simply focus on making their work extraordinary. One group chases recognition, the other chases excellence. The contrast reveals much about lasting success. Seeking credit actually diminishes the quality of your work. When you're continuously concerned with ensuring proper recognition, your focus splits between the work itself and how it will be perceived. This divided attention prevents the total immersion that creates truly exceptional results. Additionally, organizations and communities naturally recognize those who prioritize contribution over credit and tend to withhold opportunities from those who seem more concerned with personal recognition than collective outcomes. Develop silent excellence by measuring yourself against personal standards rather than external validation. Practice contributing to projects without signature or special mention. When working in teams, celebrate others' achievements more visibly than your own. If recognition is missed, ask whether the work itself was still worth doing. If not, reconsider your motivations. Remember that the quality of your contribution speaks more eloquently about your value than any amount of self-promotion. Elizabeth Mitchell demonstrated this approach throughout her groundbreaking career. While colleagues maneuvered for prominent authorship positions and press mentions, she consistently focused solely on the research itself. Junior team members were often surprised when she added their names to papers while downplaying her own critical contributions. When a significant discovery from her lab received international attention, journalists were confused to find Mitchell working quietly on her next project, rather than giving interviews about the achievement. When finally asked about this pattern, she explained, "I discovered early that I couldn't simultaneously chase quality and credit. Every moment spent ensuring proper recognition was a moment not spent advancing the work. I chose the work and found that recognition eventually follows excellence much more reliably than excellence follows recognition." What areas of your life show a divided focus between creating quality and ensuring you receive credit? How might your work improve if you channeled recognition-seeking energy back into excellence itself? Notice how concern about proper acknowledgement often feels justified while actually preventing your highest contribution. Most people pursue recognition hoping it will confirm their excellence. The successful pursue excellence and let recognition follow naturally. Will you continue splitting your focus between the quality of your work and the recognition it receives? Or will you discover the freedom of excellence for its own sake? The paradox of silent excellence is that it ultimately generates more meaningful recognition than directly pursuing credit ever could. When you focus solely on making your contribution as valuable as possible, without concern for who knows about your role, you create work that cannot be ignored. This silent dedication to quality over credit isn't about devaluing yourself. It's about understanding that true value doesn't require constant announcement. The most respected individuals in any field aren't those who ensure everyone knows about their contributions. They're those whose contributions speak so clearly that everyone already knows. Your willingness to let your work speak for itself rather than speaking about your work demonstrates a confidence that draws others toward both your contribution and eventually recognition of the contributor. Building what lasts. Observe the difference between those seeking quick results and those building something enduring. While most chase immediate outcomes and visible progress, the truly successful often work with a striking patience, measuring their efforts not in days or months, but in years or decades. Observe the difference between those seeking quick results and those building something enduring. While most chase immediate outcomes and visible progress, the truly successful often work with a striking patience, measuring their efforts not in days or months, but in years or decades. Impatience forces shortcuts that undermine lasting success. When you need immediate results, whether for emotional satisfaction or external validation, you make decisions focused on short-term outcomes rather than long-term value. This rush creates an illusion of progress while actually extending the total time needed for meaningful achievement. The paradox of success is that slower, more methodical approaches often reach the destination faster than frantic attempts at acceleration. Develop silent patience by extending your time horizons. For important projects, ask, how would my approach change if I were thinking 5 years ahead instead of 5 months? Create meaningful milestones that celebrate progress rather than depending entirely on final outcomes for satisfaction. Practice the discipline of removing unnecessary steps rather than rushing necessary ones. When facing setbacks, view them within your extended time frame rather than as emergencies. Remember that patience isn't passive waiting. It's active building with respect for necessary time. Richard Thompson, when launching a new literary magazine. While competitors rushed to market with flashy but superficial publications, Thompson spent nearly 2 years developing relationships with writers, refining editorial standards, and building sustainable systems before releasing the first issue. Investors grew restless, questioning the lengthy preparation time when other magazines were already generating revenue. When finally launched, the publication immediately established itself as a literary benchmark, while the rushed competitors had already begun folding. When asked about his conspicuous patience, Thompson explained, "They were building magazines. We were building an institution. The timeline must match the ambition. What needs to exist for decades cannot be rushed into existence in months." What important work are you currently rushing that might benefit from more methodical development? How might your approach change if you extended your timeline for important goals? Notice how the pressure for quick results often leads to solutions that don't actually save time, but merely create an appearance of progress. Most people sacrifice quality for speed. The successful understand when speed must be sacrificed for quality. Will you continue demanding immediate outcomes from processes that require development, or will you match your patience to the significance of what you're building? The power of silent patience comes from its recognition that meaningful creation follows natural rhythms that cannot always be accelerated. Just as a farmer cannot rush the growth of crops by pulling on the shoots, some achievements cannot be hurried beyond their natural development. This patient perspective isn't resignation to sluggish progress, it's respect for the necessary seasons of growth. The most patient individuals aren't idle. They're actively building with an understanding of which elements can be accelerated and which require time to mature properly. Your ability to work steadily without the constant emotional reward of immediate results may feel unsatisfying compared to the quick dopamine hits of visible progress, but it allows you to build what others cannot. Work with foundations deep enough to support lasting impact rather than temporary attention. Learning instead of displaying knowledge. Watch the behavior of people in learning situations. While many rush to demonstrate what they already know, the truly successful often ask simple questions or remain quiet, absorbing new information even in fields where they have expertise. Displaying current knowledge prevents acquiring new understanding. When your priority in conversations becomes showing others how much you know, you create two significant barriers to learning. First, while you're talking, you cannot listen, closing yourself to new information. Second, your mind focuses on organizing existing knowledge for presentation rather than opening to new perspectives. This pattern eventually leads to intellectual stagnation disguised as expertise. Cultivate the silent student mindset by entering conversations with questions rather than statements. Practice the discipline of not sharing your knowledge unless specifically asked. Before expressing disagreement, seek to understand the other perspective thoroughly through inquiry. In meetings or classes, challenge yourself to ask at least one genuine question before offering any information. When you have expertise in a topic, adopt the phrase, "I," rather than immediately sharing your own view. Remember that learning happens in silence, not in speech. Margaret Anderson transformed her approach to business using this exact method in 1962. Despite her recognized expertise in traditional markets, she noticed younger analysts identifying opportunities she had missed. Rather than asserting her superior experience, she began scheduling private meetings with these junior colleagues. In these sessions, she asked questions and listened without interruption, taking detailed notes despite her senior position. When one surprised analyst asked why she didn't offer more of her own insights, she explained, "I already know everything I know. My future success depends on what I don't yet know, which I can only discover through silence." This approach led her to identify emerging markets years before competitors, extending her career success for decades beyond her peers who remained locked in past expertise. Where in your life do you find yourself speaking as an expert when you could be listening as a student? How might your knowledge expand if you approached familiar topics with genuine curiosity rather than ready answers? Notice how the social reward of appearing knowledgeable often feels more compelling than the private process of becoming more knowledgeable. Most people use conversation to display what they've learned. The successful use it to expand what they can learn. Will you continue prioritizing the appearance of knowing, or will you embrace the silent vulnerability that leads to actual growth? The paradox of the silent student is that it requires more confidence to ask simple questions than to give complex answers. Displaying current knowledge provides immediate status and validation, while embracing the learner's mindset requires temporarily setting aside your need for others' recognition of your expertise. Yet this silent approach to learning doesn't diminish your actual value. It continuously increases it, and the most respected minds aren't those who know the most at any given moment. They're those who continue growing when others have stopped. Your willingness to set aside the social comfort of being seen as knowledgeable creates the space where genuine wisdom can develop. In the long run, the question that expands your understanding always serves you better than the impressive answer that merely validates what you already know. Celebrating in private. Observe how differently people handle achievements. Many immediately broadcast each success, seeking maximum recognition. But notice how the most consistently successful often acknowledge wins with surprising restraint, sometimes saying nothing at all about significant accomplishments. Excessive celebration creates vulnerability to future disappointment. When you develop the habit of seeking external validation for every achievement, you create three problems. First, you become dependent on others' recognition for your sense of accomplishment. Second, you establish an unsustainable pattern where each success must be larger than the last to generate the same emotional reward. Third, and most dangerous, you signal to competitors exactly where you're succeeding, inviting targeted response before your position is secure. The most sustainable success often develops in protective quiet. Practice silent victory by developing private celebration rituals that don't depend on others' acknowledgement. For significant achievements, take personal time to acknowledge your progress before announcing it publicly. When tempted to immediately broadcast accomplishments, ask, will sharing this now increase or decrease its long-term impact? Be more vocal about team successes than personal ones. Remember that. Celebration is for completion, not validation. The achievement itself is the reward, not others' recognition of it. James Richardson, when launching his revolutionary product while competitors held elaborate events for even minor development milestones, Richardson's team worked in remarkable privacy. When they finally achieved the breakthrough that had eluded the industry for years, team members were surprised by his response. Instead of the expected press announcement, he simply took them to dinner, acknowledging their achievement privately while continuing work on implementation. Competitors, unaware of the breakthrough, didn't develop counter strategies during the critical market entry period. When asked years later about this unusual restraint, Richardson explained, "Premature celebration serves the ego but endangers the work. The greatest competitive advantage is often the victory no one knows you've achieved until its results become impossible to ignore." Where might your desire for recognition be creating unnecessary vulnerability in your work or life? How could strategic silence around certain accomplishments actually increase their ultimate impact? Notice how immediate validation often feels essential, but actually creates dependence on external responses you cannot control. Most people celebrate to be seen succeeding. The successful focus on extending success beyond the current achievement. Will you continue seeking maximum visibility for every victory, or will you discover the power of accomplishments that remain private until their results speak for themselves? The wisdom of silent victory comes from understanding the difference between achievement and announcement. Private accomplishment allows you to build momentum without drawing attention that might create obstacles. This restraint isn't about denying yourself satisfaction. It's about finding that satisfaction in the achievement itself rather than others' acknowledgement of it. The most consistently successful individuals aren't those who celebrate most visibly. They're those who translate each victory immediately into progress toward the next goal. Your ability to find fulfillment in private accomplishment rather than public recognition demonstrates a confidence that ultimately creates more sustained success than any amount of external validation. Let your results eventually speak louder than any announcement could. They tell a more compelling story about your value than your own words ever could. Creating without feedback. Notice the difference between those who share their creative work immediately, seeking feedback at every step, and those who develop ideas in extended privacy, showing others only when the vision has substantially formed. This pattern reveals much about original thinking. Premature feedback often diminishes creative breakthrough. When you expose early-stage ideas to evaluation, 3 problems typically emerge. First, unique concepts naturally face resistance because they don't fit established patterns. Without sufficient development, they're easily dismissed before proving their value. Second, early feedback focuses on surface flaws rather than core potential, distracting you from the most important development work. Third, and most significant, external input during formation stages leads toward conventional thinking precisely when unconventional approaches offer the greatest opportunity for breakthrough. Nurture silent creativity by establishing judgment-free zones for your early development process. Practice capturing ideas without immediately evaluating them. Develop the discipline of exploring concepts thoroughly before seeking any external feedback. Create private space and time dedicated solely to development without interruption. When you must discuss early ideas, select only those rare individuals who can respond to potential rather than polish. Remember that creativity requires protection from premature judgment, including, most crucially, your own. Where in your creative process might you be seeking feedback too early? Before ideas have fully formed, how might your most original thinking benefit from extended protection from judgment? Notice how the emotional comfort of validation often feels necessary, but actually pulls you toward conventional thinking when originality requires temporary discomfort. Most people create with constant external reference points. The successful trust their vision enough to develop it in privacy. Will you continue seeking immediate feedback for fragile ideas, Or will you give your creativity the silent space it needs to become truly extraordinary? The power of silent creativity comes from understanding that original thought must temporarily detach from conventional wisdom to reach its full potential. This detachment isn't permanent. Feedback becomes invaluable once your vision has developed sufficient clarity and strength to withstand engagement without fundamental distortion. The most innovative creators aren't those who ignore outside perspective entirely, they're those who carefully control when and how that perspective enters their process. Your willingness to develop ideas in extended privacy, tolerating the uncertainty of working without constant validation, may feel isolating compared to the immediate reassurance of feedback. Yet this silence creates the conditions where your most valuable contributions can emerge. Work that doesn't merely extend existing conventions, but transforms them into something previously unimagined. It's time to unlock the silent power that the most influential people in history have mastered. Embrace the strength of silence, not as the absence of speech, but as the presence of control. Let your silence speak louder than words, commanding respect and authority in every interaction. Make your presence felt without uttering a sound. Take this power with you into every room, every negotiation, and every decision. Master it and watch the world listen.